Hi, this is the Dr. Deborah Show, and this is the show where we talk about bringing peace and calm into your life. And later in the show, we'll be talking about mental health stigma. We're live at KCSB FM Santa Barbara, 91.9, and KCSB is a platform for cultural expression and thoughtful discussion, providing a diverse educational forum. And I'm a Santa Barbara-based clinical psychologist, and I specialize in pediatric neuropsychology. And during my clinical training and my current work, I've treated thousands of people. I'm also a UCSB alumni, and I live locally in Santa Barbara. So this show is all about our community and how to create compassionate conversations about our well-being and health. Today on the show, we're going to be talking about mental health and well-being with a focus on sexuality, LGBTQ, with our very special guest, Mariela Marin. Is it Marin?
It is.
Marin, okay. MFT. And Mariela currently serves as the Executive Director of Community Counseling Center. It's also called CCEC, which allows her the opportunity to work not only with the community, but also to work with talented trainees and interns. She is caring for the well-being of the Santa Barbara community, one phone call, one client, trainee, associate, supervisor, center supporter, and human at a time. She was also previously the Director of Counseling and Recovering Services at Pacific Pride Foundation. And Mariela has worked with other area nonprofits serving abused and neglected children and the LGBTQ community since 2001. She was raised by her Mexican father and her Spanish mother, who taught her the importance of love, being true, and building community. She earned her master's in clinical psychology from Antioch University, and she's returned to her alma mater to serve as adjunct faculty in 2006. And Mariela's strong interest is in the area of multicultural competence, and she is dedicated to combating power, oppression, and privilege through the empowerment of her clients and students. So welcome to the show, Mariela.
Thanks so much.
And Mariela and I have known each other a long time, so I'm so happy to have her on the show to share all her wisdom. And I do just like to talk a little bit about mental health stigma, like what is mental health stigma, and why are we talking about it? And we're talking about mental health stigma today because in recent news, did you know that mental health is the largest public health priority and the largest financial burden of any health issue in the world? And that's according to the World Health Organization and the World Economic Forum. In a report by the Centers for Disease Control called Attitudes Towards Mental Illness, they found that stigma and embarrassment are two of the top reasons why people with mental health issues do not seek help or medication. I also always like to just reinforce that issues surrounding mental health affect all of us, really people from all walks of life. So none of us are really devoid of mental health. And then I also just like to talk about what is mental health. From my perspective, I think of it as like a physiological balance where our heart is beating at a nice rate and our thoughts are maybe more peaceful. And I think that we can also just deal with more, too, challenges. And that gives us a sense of inner peace. Mariela, I was wondering, how would you describe mental health?
Sure, that's such a great question. And, you know, to be totally honest, I think it depends on what day you ask me what my answer would be.
That's great.
Yeah, but, I would say in general, my thought around what mental health is, and especially, for me and what I hope for my clients is, and really for anyone in the world, is really an ability to recognize one's strengths, recognize that there will be pain, there will be difficulty along the way. That's part of the beauty of being human. But mental health is that awareness of resiliency and capability and ways of learning new things and really just kind of keep going is, that mental health mantra for me is just keep going. So the idea of persevering, I think, is part of it for me.
That is so true. And you know what? I always tell my patients, that I really am a big believer in persistency and consistency. I actually haven't been saying that as much lately, but maybe I need to go back to that. But it's true. I think, even if we just persist on a minute level, or second, if you feel like the day is too much to think about, but just kind of keeping at it, that's kind of what you're saying too.
Right.
And that builds resiliency. That's a great idea. And what were you saying about that it changes? I mean, I don't know if you want to elaborate.
Sure.
What did you mean by that?
Absolutely. And some days, the days where I wake up and it's a little bit harder, mental health is just about getting through the day. Other days where I wake up and things are fantastic, it's about celebrating that and just going with it, not trying to maybe even make it any better, just being in whatever that moment kind of brings for me. Yeah.
Right, like just the reality that every day isn't going to be ideal, or you're not going to always feel great every single day. It's not like a flat line, in a way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think like we all have our own idea about mental health, but I'd just like to ask that to see.
Yeah.
And I think that, the healthcare needs of the LGBTQ population continue to evolve. And I think that access to quality and effective healthcare is a key issue that's facing all Americans. And I think that some groups face even more obstacles in this area. And, one such group is like the LGBTQ community, which faces, unique challenges in the healthcare realm. And I think that especially, I know just with talking about mental health stigma, right? That's a big barrier, I think, to people getting mental health, probably because people feel stigmatized. And so I do just like to break down a little bit about what is mental health stigma. And I've just broken it down really into two simple categories. But as far as social stigma and self-stigma, I feel like we need to come up with a new word for stigma too. But anyhow, social stigma is when we have attitudes or discriminating behavior that are directed towards individuals with mental health problems as a result of a label they may have been given. And self-stigma is when we internalize perceptions of discrimination. And I find both those to be very common. I think self-stigma is a very strong one because if someone thinks something about us, that can really lead to feelings of shame. And then we have poor treatment outcomes. Because we get more isolated. So studies have suggested that stigmatizing attitudes towards people with mental health problems, or just with any, problems, are widespread and commonly held. And maybe they're not even all problems. I think if we just are different sometimes too, right? People just become, I've been hearing people say the word weird all week, or I'm so weird, or that person's, I'm like, well, everybody's a little bit weird. But I think it's important to really think about where that's coming from too, so we can be healthy and not be stigmatizing.
Right.
So I was wondering, Maria, how do you think that mental health and sexuality, or LGBTQ, kind of intersect?
Yeah, that's another great question. I think just first of all, recognizing that we are sexual beings and it's part of our identity. It's who we are. So, when we think of mental health and wanting to really acknowledge wholeness in the person, our physical selves, our emotional selves, our spiritual selves, sexuality is part of that. So, yeah, it has to be addressed, especially when it is creating some sort of distress or, discomfort or question, as part of what can provide balance for us and what can provide new perspectives for us.
Right. Well, and I mean, sexuality is, like you're saying, it's such an expression of who we are. But do you think, I know I just was doing a little bit of research and about sexuality and LGBTQ, and I know that the focus of healthcare has shifted more heavily. I think in the past it was focused much more on like HIV prevention and treatment, and now there's much more of a focus covering the overall health needs of LGBTQ patients and working toward more competent care to ensure access to more comprehensive health care. And also for both patients and doctors to be comfortable talking about health matters. Because I think these topics have traditionally been ignored by medical schools. Although I was happy to hear there's this Wayne State University, which they're training their medical students about the specific needs relating to the LGBTQ patients. And that can really help with the communication and make like a visit to a doctor less daunting.
Sure.
I was wondering, Mariela, why do you think that taking care of our mental health is so essential?
Yeah, I think I think it's at the core of living a balanced life, for sure. And a life that feels authentic and really worth living. And I think that's part of that mental health question of what is mental health. It's feeling like one can be themselves and express themselves and really enjoy who that is. So really, acknowledging that and working with it as part of the whole package is that key piece.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like how you keep using the word balance, because that's how I did all my research on. And I think, we kind of throughout our day, we really have to recalibrate ourselves.
Yes.
And the word, that they use, it's kind of like an updated term for homeostasis, which is dynamic regulation, meaning, we have all this external stimuli, people, places, sounds, smells coming in. And then we have our internal world, which is like our thoughts and our feelings and our psyche and our soul and our nervous system. And how do those two worlds meet to create balance?
Yeah.
So like throughout our days, maybe one day does feel more fluid and peaceful, and maybe one day feels more tumultuous or rocky. But I think the key is to check in, with ourselves, right? Because otherwise we can't take care of our mental health.
Absolutely.
But, I think we're taught, too, to look at the world from the lens of our upbringing and the life experiences that shape us. And, I just am always wondering why we've chosen to overlook the importance of our mental health. And I keep coming back to the stigma, which is just this like mark of shame, or it's like a obstacle for an individual to overcome. And I think that these labels really stem from misinformation and isolation and negative attitudes. From like a lack of understanding about a behavior or an appearance of communication, and then gets labeled as not normal. And I was wondering, Mariela, can you explain how sexuality, I know you briefly were just talking about how like sexuality is an expression of ourself, and that it's such an important part because it helps us to feel authentic, I think, and it's true.
Absolutely.
We want to feel like we relate with ourselves in a way that's genuine.
Right.
By doing that, by, being able to express our sexuality, however, whatever our sexuality is, how does that relate to our mental health by having that ability?
Right. Yeah. Well, I think it's an acknowledgement of those core pieces of who we are, right? And so it is, when we can find comfort and just, I think maybe a piece around what it is that we actually feel about ourselves and understand about ourselves, that's going to, slow the whole process down, take one, issue off the table that may be creating that chaos internally. And so it really is an important piece to acknowledge for ourselves and to recognize that what we feel about ourselves internally, absolutely, there's probably going to be judgment somewhere, whether it's about sexuality or anything else. Right. But if it's ours, it's ours. Yeah. And who gets to tell us whether it's, like you were saying, weird or normal or not? It's who we are.
Exactly. I think that's what makes us all like so beautiful, is because we're different. If we were all the same, it'd be kind of a boring piece. I remember somewhere along the way I read or learned that people think about sex quite often. Do you know any of the statistics about how often people? I was just curious.
Oh, good. I thought you were going to ask me how much I did.
No. If you want to tell us, but I remember just like something like that. The average man thinks about sex like every 11 seconds or something. Right. I don't know, and I don't.
That sounds familiar. Yeah, I don't know the facts, but that does sound familiar.
I just would think that we all were sexual beings, right? And so we're always maybe counteracting how we feel, not only by what's socially acceptable, but also how we feel about that with ourselves, right?
Right, yeah. Yeah, and all the messages that we've gotten around it, and, based on your gender, how much you're supposed to think about it, or based on your, age or ethnicity or whatever it is, because there is so much that's also attached to that.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Do you think that, so that you don't know about any statistics as far as how often,
I don't.
Or just even in your experience, do you think people are thinking about sexuality quite often, and throughout their day, even if they're working or going to school or whatever they're doing?
Yeah, I think there definitely is. And I think, just like everything, there's different periods in people's lives where it might be a little bit more intense or it might be different in nature. And again, also, it's affected by what the news stories are out in the world,
right.
What your interaction was like with a coworker or the new person who came in the door, and, what feelings that brings up. So I definitely think, it's always kind of right there
On the precipice. Yeah,
on the precipice.
That's kind of what I just was having a little epiphany moment, realizing, this is not something that's like a separate piece of us. It's such a part of us.
Totally.
But I think especially in America, we're much more sexually not as open. Like I know when I traveled to Europe, it seemed like, well, in Spain and France and stuff, people are much more, and Amsterdam, people are more open about sexuality. Do you think that, have you traveled and noticed a difference in the way people relate with sexuality?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's so interesting to, have those conversations with people of different cultural backgrounds and, just to hear that there are other possibilities for how we relate or how we express or how we even think about sexuality and the sexual act and all of that. Yeah.
Well, it's true because, I think, when we grow up in our families, and some of us have families where maybe we talk about that more, and some of us grow up in families where we're not allowed to talk about that. And then we're taught that what we're told is what it is. But then I find that people are always so conflicted about that because they want to inherently be who they are, that's just who they are.
Right.
So I think that's a challenge there.
Yeah.
What do you think that your work in the sexuality, like LGBTQ field, has taught you about the attitudes held toward mental health? Like, do you think people that are working in the LGBTQ field, do they talk about mental health? Is that like a common open discussion, or is that something that you think still needs more talking?
Yeah. That's a good question. I think it's definitely high up there, in terms of priorities and awareness that it is a priority for the LGBT community. Just if you look at the statistics, kids are, who identify as LGBT are 3 times more likely to even think about suicide, 5 times more likely to attempt. And that's not to say that LGBTQ people are more sad or more, prone to suicide. Yeah. It's because mental health isn't being addressed. And so I think the community itself is very aware. And, I think even from our own personal experiences, those of us who identify as LGBT, we sort of resonate with our own experience and recognize that that's probably going on for others as well. So it is right there on the radar. And I think more and more people are coming together to actually, do wraparound services and really address all of that as much as possible.
To collaborate. I was glad because my son's teacher had I think someone come in who is transgender, but it was interesting. It's always interesting how the parents react and the kids react. But I did look up some numbers just to show kind of like some of the specific issues, but I don't know if they're totally current because I know you said 3 times more likely to attempt suicide. And then I noticed that it said that youths are more likely to be homeless. It said lesbian and bisexual women are less likely to receive screening for breast and cervical cancer.
Yes, yeah. Absolutely.
And also more likely to be overweight or obese. Why do you think that is?
And I think it goes back to something you were talking about earlier, just with that healthcare piece. Even just from personal experience, I've had great doctors, loving people who want to help me be healthy. Yeah. But without necessarily a recognition of some of the languaging that they use can make someone feel really uncomfortable. I can't tell you how many times I've been asked if I use birth control after already letting them know that I'm married to a woman. Right. That's not going to happen.
Like they're not listening almost.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that must not feel very supportive.
Right, yeah, totally. And so, it's just that thing of, well, gosh, do I have to go to the doctor again and say these things over again? So then maybe I won't go.
Yeah, it's demoralizing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see. Well, I know it's just hard to go to the doctor.
Yeah, totally.
For any of it, what I mean? And then if you have something that you're going to be scrutinized or overlooked for, I noticed there was a lot of research actually on elderly LGBTQ people that face additional barriers to health because of isolation, lack of social services, and culturally competent providers.
Absolutely.
So, and then some of the other data that I found was like that transgender individuals have a higher prevalence of victimization, mental health issues, suicide, HIV, and other sexually transmitted infections, and are less likely to have health insurance.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah. And again, I think that's part of, there's a few different things at play there. There's the fear of actually going and asking for help and getting the services, how you're going to be treated. Right. Then there's, the lack of programs that maybe are available or even people know about. They may even be there, but there's very little awareness that they're there, and folks, need to have outreach happen to them. But if it's not happening, those are going to go unused.
Right. Well, I wonder if it gets like there's a crossroads almost, where it's like, a person goes in, like say a transgender individual goes in, but then if you're talking to someone like you're saying and they don't really understand, not really hearing you, that's going to make it like triply at least hard.
Right.
Why do you think, though, that they're less likely to have health insurance? Would that be because they don't have access to resources, or there's a stigma that way too, where health insurance companies are not? Is there something happening there?
Sure. And I think part of it is, even just filling out the form. If the insurance company requires you to fill out your, legal name, your biological sex,
right,
and that's not where you're at, there is that conflict of, do I do this to get the resources? Do I do it and out myself in a way that I didn't need to be outed, maybe to an employer or to someone else? There are those very practical reasons why folks may not even go through the process, even if it's available to them, because of what impact it will have.
Mm-hmm. Right. The ramifications of the outcomes. I think, though, that the mass media is like one of the public's primary sources of information, too, about mental health disorders. And I think most people's knowledge also comes about mental health or mental illness. I like to use the word mental health issues
right
from the media. I don't watch actually TV. I don't have TV actually, but I do watch movies sometimes. And there's that classic kind of portrayal. Do you think that in the media industry, do you think that they've embraced sexuality more, or do you think they still mislead people in the way they present that?
Oh, wow.
That's a big juicy question.
Yeah, that is a juicy one.
I actually didn't even have that on my thing here, but I just kind of, there was.
And I hate to take the sort of soft way out, half and half, right?
Yeah.
Because I definitely think, and I recognize the media is also, they have the purpose of selling things and, getting viewers and whatever. But there has to be a recognition that, it has an impact on the messages we received and how we, internalize that. And so I think there's a lot of positive to the fact that there is more visibility. There definitely is more visibility.
That is true. That's very true.
Yeah.
So there's a positive part that with the media that, I guess the depiction, though, do you think that they depict people accurately?
I would say not all that accurately, at least the real life experience, right? And so, I think there's definitely a lot of space to improve there and just to create a huge spectrum of representation as opposed to, we've started at one place, but there's definitely room for a lot more. Yeah.
Right. I agree completely. Well, we're kind of at the beginning in a way.
Yeah.
Although sexuality, it's I remember when I went to Pompeii with my dad. It's like they have all the sexual acts, up on the wall there.
Right.
Because, we all, I guess, need to be sexual. So it's just a part of our lives. But it's just fascinating to me how we don't depict it accurately. I wonder why that is, if it's more enticing or it seems more interesting.
Yeah.
How do you feel like a person who understands their sexuality or being, the LGBTQ pieces of themselves could help a person through a mental health crisis?
Yeah, well, one thing, if you do understand yourself and are comfortable with where you're at, it definitely is one less thing, right, that you are actually dealing with or that is compounding what's there. So it takes away one of those, added elements. I think it also is important to be aware that it can always sneak in as, an additional thing to what is impacting your mental health. So to be aware of it, sometimes I have something going on and I go, I know exactly what it is without realizing, actually my gender presentation or my sexuality or my, sexual orientation, it actually does impact me. Mm-hmm. So it's important to, recognize that even though I'm comfortable with who I am, there's still that potential, but it can help to at least minimize an additional negative factor.
Well, because you'd have more self-acceptance, too.
Yeah.
And then, do you think that someone, if they're going through a mental health crisis, they could reach out to other people, right? That they
Absolutely.
could. Do you think that that's a close-knit community of people who reach out to each other, or is that more private?
Yeah, I think it depends. Some of it depends on, where folks are generationally. Certain generations have different ways of communicating and reaching out.
Right.
It also depends on where you're at in your life. And I think it also depends on an awareness of what's available And then it also depends on where you're at in your own personal process of how ready you are to actually reach out. But when folks reach out, it's important to know that there are people who want to engage and do want to be of service, and do want to share in that exchange of support. So oftentimes it's just about knowing that it's worth what feels like a big risk. There's actually big reward.
Well, yeah, and I also think, I mean, it doesn't necessarily maybe have to be with someone who has, I know I'm thinking of a gentleman that came to one of our HopeNet events. It was our annual suicide vigil, and he had heard like a public service announcement on the radio, and I was really happy he came. And he was talking about how he was bisexual, but he had been with a person who was transgender, and there was a lot of violence, and he was recovering from that. It meant so much to him just to be able to come out and be with other people.
Right.
And talk about mental health. And I think that also he had some drums and stuff. So that was really cool.
Yeah.
And I think that it made me actually feel better too. I mean, just to be able to support, whatever his position was.
Right, right.
So what resources, if someone were looking, where could they go if they were in a mental health crises?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
They, have, or LGBTQ.
Yeah. The beauty of, Santa Barbara is that there are a lot of resources out there.
Nice.
Sometimes it's so many that it's overwhelming.
Yeah. I know Pacific Pride, and I know you worked at Pacific Pride. So.
Yeah. And, everyone there is so lovely. And it's not just about mental health, and it's definitely a big component, but there's lots of different things. So, and that's the one thing I would say as well, whatever the need is, even if you're calling a place that you feel like it's not necessarily, they don't have what I need, you never know who they know and who they can refer you to.
Yep.
And so, I would definitely say Pacific Pride. I want to say over at CCEC with us, we've got lots of folks who identify as LGBT, a lot of folks who have done a lot of work working with the LGBT community. We work with Pacific Pride Foundation. There are lots of private practitioners in town who've done tons of training. They themselves identify. Yep. There's just so many possibilities.
There's physicians and stuff too.
Yeah.
So if someone were to come to like the community counseling center, they would get there. You offer like therapy and those kinds of resources.
Right. Yeah. We do the individual therapy, couples, family, all sorts of stuff.
So someone could just call there.
Sure.
Is that sliding scale, or how do people pay for? Because I know with health insurance that, like how we've been talking, especially if someone doesn't even have health insurance because maybe they didn't want to fill out the forms. Right. Then what happens?
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah. So at CCEC, we are on a sliding scale, and folks, pay themselves. So we're not reporting to anyone. No one's asking us for your information. So it is a sliding scale.
Private.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Based on number of dependents, life situations, what your income is. And we like to work with folks because we want folks to get the treatment that they deserve. And we don't want that to be an obstacle. So It's really about giving us a call and, us working with you.
Do you provide services in like carpentry or anywhere like that? Or is that, because I know carpentry, we're always trying to get more services just for this board I'm on, we're always trying to get more mental health services.
Sure. Absolutely. So our office is based in Santa Barbara over by the high school.
Right.
And we do have some folks who come in from Carpinteria. We don't actually have any services out in Carpinteria where folks go anywhere in Carpinteria, but that's definitely the type of thing where I love to talk. So those types of situations, I love to go wherever I'm invited and do things like that.
Nice.
Work with workshops and, events that come up and things like that. So absolutely.
Well, I was just thinking of like, there's a group of people. It's kind of like they're close in Carpinteria, but there aren't really that many resources. And I know there's, there's some kids that actually we've had at our community meetings and stuff that identify. And so I was thinking, it's like, I don't know where they go to, it's like very isolating. I love that they're coming and speaking out, about their experiences. I also just like to support, like figure out what resources and support there are. So you basically are saying there's quite a bit though of support. Just if you wanted to find something out there. And I think that self-acceptance is the greatest gift you can give yourself. I always try to teach people to make friends with themselves because I think a lot of us don't think about that. We're just either we think we have to please everyone else, but then we kind of don't live a life that feels very fulfilling because we're not, like you said, being authentic.
Right.
So I know that there was some statistic I found that California adults with mental health issues who sought treatment, only 17% report they did not get it, which I know is not accurate because do you get statistics about that? Like how many people that are trying to get mental health services?
Right, yeah.
And that don't?
Right, yeah, it's kind of mind-boggling. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't really, I understand, that there's obstacles, and I don't understand
Why?
everyone's exact situation. It does make me sad because it seems like, there are so many people out there who do want to help, who do want to be of service, agencies that want to be of service.
I know, I'm always trying to figure out how to bridge that.
Yeah.
That's why I'm doing the show too, just so maybe someone's listening, but how do we keep these conversations going? And also how do we create, these bridges toward other people and places?
Yeah. And encourage folks, if you don't get it the first time, keep trying.
Totally.
There's someone there who wants to help.
That's the persistency piece.
Yeah.
And even if you meet with someone and they don't understand your predicament, it doesn't mean you have to keep seeing them. You could try, like Mariela was saying, going to the next person.
Right.
And don't feel embarrassed or ashamed of that because I know my dad's a physician. He always taught me to get second or third opinions. So if someone, you want to find the right match, especially with, therapy, I think, so someone can understand your predicament.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, it kind of isn't very meaningful.
Right.
Okay, we're going to take a brief break because I know we've been talking a lot. We're here talking with Mariela Marin, and we're talking about sexuality and LGBTQ. So I hope you'll join us. We're going to talk about like health prevention, awareness, and mental health stigma a little further. And I'm going to play a public service announcement for you.
CSB Arts and Lectures presents author Elizabeth Rosenthal on Wednesday, March 13th at 7:30 p.m. at the New Vic. The former ER physician will be discussing topics in her book, An American Sickness, How Healthcare Became Big Business and How You Can Take It Back, where she unpacks one of America's most complex institutions and examines what doctors, patients, and providers can do to help repair it. Tickets and more information can be found by calling UCSB Arts and Lectures at 805-893-3535 or visiting artsandlectures.ucsb.edu.
Hi, welcome back to the Dr. Deborah Show. And this is the show where we talk about bringing peace and calm into your life. And we're here talking about mental health stigma. We're live at KCSB FM Santa Barbara 91.9. And KCSB is a platform for cultural expression and thoughtful discussion. And I'm a Santa Barbara-based clinical psychologist. I also am a UCSB alumni. And this show's all about our community and how to create compassionate conversations about our well-being and health. And today on the show, we're talking about mental health and well-being with a focus on sexuality and LGBTQ with our very special guest, Mariela Marin. Am I saying your last name right? Oh, good. Okay. I got to make sure I get the name right. Mariela currently serves as the Executive Director of Community Counseling Education Center, CCEC, which allows her the opportunity to work not only with the community, but also with the talented trainees and interns. And she's caring for the well-being of the Santa Barbara community, one phone call, client, trainee, associate, supervisor, center supporter, and human at a time. And she was also previously the Director of Counseling and Recovery Services at Pacific Pride Foundation. And Mariela has worked with other area nonprofits serving abused and neglected children and the LGBTQ community since 2001. And she was raised by her Mexican father and her Spanish mother, who taught her the importance of love, being true, and building community. I love that. And she earned her master's in clinical psychology, where we met, and returned back to Antioch to teach, and now teaches there as adjunct faculty. And Mariela's strongest interest is in the area of multicultural competence, and she is dedicated to combating power, oppression, privilege through the empowerment of her clients and students, which is awesome. So welcome to the show, Mariela.
Thanks so much.
So we've been here. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to have you. And I think this is a great resource. So I'm hoping, too, that because I know people have been asking me about sexuality and LGBTQ, and I just feel like there's so many people who want to be able to sexually express themselves. Right. But there's like always so many facets to how everything gets kind of conformed, like we're supposed to conform. And I feel like either way, we still need to be honest with ourselves,
Right.
and be authentic, because then we can live our life a little more peacefully.
Yeah.
I was wondering, have you heard of any campaigns, Mariela, or like organizations in the sexuality LGBTQ field that work specifically toward reducing mental health stigma?
You know, I mean, definitely you've got those bigger projects like the Trevor Project, out of LA. And that was especially, geared around suicide. And I would say probably, even the resource center here, at UCSB is really focused on sexual and gender issues, really focused on doing outreach, I think, with the students here in the community. Mm-hmm. And I would also say, the local agencies, like, for instance, Pacific Pride does, a ton of work around reducing stigma and really connecting people, both who are part of the LGBT community and who are not part of the LGBT community, to the issues and an awareness around the issues. And I think really anyone who is, part of this field, private practitioners, they may not be on a grand scale doing work to, move or media campaigns or whatever it might be, but even their individual work with their clients is work against reducing mental health stigma.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like the biggest campaign, huh?
Sure, exactly. Yeah, one person at a time.
Well, it's true. I mean,
Yeah.
I definitely, as we're sitting here talking, I'm realizing, I had that person. He was transgender too. He became a woman. And
Yeah.
I actually have known this one person for so many years as a man, and then he became a woman, which is great. And it's just been so cool to like support him, because I think she's so much happier, actually.
Right.
And it's like a whole lifetime of accrual of living a life that's inauthentic. So, and I think that also just young kids are curious, about sexuality. My dad was one of the first AIDS educators. So I grew up in a family talking about sexually transmitted diseases and AIDS. I was in the 80s. And, he had really close friends that had HIV that were really awesome, great people. But as you know, even then the stigma became,
Sure.
Anybody who has HIV, it's because of their sexual orientation. Of course, that all changed. So I think it's really important too, just to get educated. So,
Right.
But what you're saying about campaigns, I went off on a little tangent, is that you feel locally, especially, we have a lot of great resources because of the agencies and the independent practitioners and
Right.
CSB. And it's true, you're right. I mean, I always am thinking, have you ever heard of any like national or international campaigns, like on TV, or I don't know?
Right. Yeah. I don't, and again, kind of like you were saying earlier, I don't watch a ton of TV.
Yeah.
So I don't really know of anything that's sort of like playing all the time. There probably is something out there.
I just feel like that would counteract the media's,
Right.
with movies and all that. I was so happy because I was watching a movie or something on Hulu, and then Michael Phelps, the 12 or whatever times he won.
Oh, yeah.
The swimmer, he's there. He's saying, we need to reduce mental health stigma. Go to therapy. It's okay. I was like, yes.
Nice.
There's actually like a campaign for, maybe it's one person, but you know what I mean? Just to reduce the stigma. Do you think that there could be some kind of a campaign that would be like helpful, or like that people would listen to, would help them, understand either for themselves or someone they love or care about?
Right. Yeah. Well, I definitely do think it helps when celebrities speak out or people of influence are speaking out, and folks who are, of all different ethnicities, races, genders, ages, not just the young folks coming up, because they're doing a lot of stuff for all of us. But I think all of us, regardless of where we are on our developmental journey, it would be really helpful, even if you've been dealing with this for a long time, to come out now and just make people aware can be really helpful. So I do think there is some power in that happening. Some folks will kind of be a little negative about it. Well, they're celebrities, but you know what? We're all at the core people,
Right,
and that's important.
Exactly. The Dalai Lama, he says we're all breathing in the same air.
Yep,
I mean, we're all here. It's kind of an illusion we have that we're like so separate.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. We have everything configured. Well, and I do think that people listen to movie stars. So
Sure.
I guess I'm always trying to get people maybe like that to be more proactive. I'm trying to think of a movie star that would be like, I know Lady Gaga is very
Sure.
open to talking about mental health stigma as well. In fact, she's got a huge campaign she does, but
Yeah.
it's just trying to drum up an idea that maybe would manifest itself.
Yeah, totally. Let's put it out there.
And let's put it out there. Maybe somebody will be listening. I was doing a little other research, and I found that this University of Illinois, there was a study that looked at the effect of, there was like a case on it was called Obergefell versus Hodges, and it was a case about the mental health. The case had on the mental health of LGBTQ couples,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a study from the University of Illinois by this Brian Ogalski. And he found that the legalization of same-sex marriage in the U.S. has improved the mental health of LGBTQ
Absolutely.
couples, which is exactly what you're saying.
Sure. Yeah.
Is half of it is just the idea of like, oh, I just need to be self-accepting, and maybe, I guess, do you think they're getting health care that maybe the person's accepting of them, or what do you think?
Sure. Yeah. And like those legal cases that have been going on for, however long, on a day-to-day basis. And I can just use my personal experience at home with my wife. I wake up every morning thrilled at the fact that I am with her and that we are together and that we are who we are.
Yeah.
And, I don't need anyone to tell me that, to wake up feeling that way.
Right.
But then to have visibility around, something becoming legalized or someone coming out in support, what that does is it bolsters it and it makes it that much stronger. It's not going to, change it or make it, change the quality of it. It's just another thing that, we all like to have support and folks who are telling us that they can get behind us.
Right.
So it's the same around issues of sexual orientation and gender expression. So yeah, I think of the cases that have gone on, nationally. I mean, we've celebrated them like Christmas to the 10th degree, so it does have an impact.
Right.
And maybe it's not constant, but even that day, it's like, enjoy it.
Oh, it's awesome. I mean, one of my best friends he's gay, and he's been one of my best friends for like 20 something years. And I've lived, been around him and listened to him. And it's hard, it's hard enough to be in that relationship. And then maybe like if you live in a town, maybe not like Santa Barbara.
Right.
Right. And then also just trying to kind of conform a little bit.
Right.
And then if you've been listening, like, oh, you shouldn't be getting married because it's not what you should be doing. You get it, like, I know this person's older than you.
Uh-huh.
So I think that like older, probably LGBTQ, like we were talking about younger, middle-aged, older, there's probably like a whole different experience. But I mean, they definitely clearly found that psychological distress dropped and life satisfaction increased after the U.S. Supreme Court ruling, and that the findings held regardless of the marital status. So I think that the positive effects were felt, by these individuals in the same-sex relationships, whether they were married or unmarried.
Right.
So, and also they were saying that anxiety, depression, and life satisfaction, they measured it 4 months before the ruling and then a year after it was made. And they just found, that they had this really positive effect on people showing the highest levels of distress.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, and it's saying if you have experienced higher levels of stigma related to sexual orientation before, then you had a larger reduction in minority stress and larger gain in psychological well-being after the decision. But it's probably hard because, like you're saying, the changes are constant. I mean, I was talking to you beforehand about this Google thing, and there's always I just do a little news search, and it seems precarious,
Right, absolutely.
So do you think that impacts people's ability to reach out and get help?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely do. And I think it's, it impacts an individual on a personal basis, and then it also impacts, an individual's perspective of how they're going to be treated, depending on what sort of the climate is like at any given point out there. And so, just as soon as you're getting comfortable, maybe the climate changes.
Right.
And then it's like, gosh, I'm going to withdraw back because I'm not going to feel comfortable in this place of limbo. So I'll just protect and defend. And then I'm stuck.
Right, then the isolation.
Yeah.
Do you think other countries are different than us, or do you think this is a global issue?
I think there's definitely a global nature to this. I mean, I think it's obviously specific to different places in the way that it's expressed. And, we've definitely got places out there who still criminalize a lot of this stuff. And, people are experiencing torture and things like that. So I think it really is something that is a global issue, just it manifests in different ways.
Right.
So, for now, we're sort of obviously being aware of what's going on for us while also still trying to support the rest of the world, but it is going to be in different ways.
Yeah, I was just thinking of like in the Latino culture, how, I mean, actually, a lot of times a man will be married and maybe might have other relations with another man. But I think also and I'm not just talking about that. I'm actually Latina too.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that culturally, then if you apply the cultural piece. But what's fascinating about that I was thinking is how that also really emphasizes the stigma, right?
Yeah.
Because then the person takes it out on their wife and kids or whoever their partner is,
Sure.
So if we were able to embrace that somehow and be more transparent about it, I mean, do you think that would be healthier?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the reality, and we look at those old studies and theorists who talked about fluidity and how we're all there, right? And I mean, that's still relevant, and we have to keep talking about that to create more conversation about, there is a fluidity around this, and to talk about it isn't going to do anybody any harm, and rather it's going to actually shed some light in some places that need some light.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very torturous. Like, I know I'm thinking of one person that I think they're in their 70s probably now, but I mean, they were married with kids and I've seen them for a while. And more recently, they wrote me and said, I actually left my wife. And I mean, it's fine. The wife was okay.
Yeah.
And kind of came to this full circle. And so they have a partner and like, he's so happy because he's like his true self.
Right.
But I was just thinking also how that's so, like, if there were a way to get that sooner, because I mean, if you live your whole life too, I mean, I think our kids will be different. But
right.
To be, for the older population of LGBTQ,
right.
There's probably even more isolation.
Sure.
Because of that generational idea. So, I mean, I guess maybe do you think we need more programs to be developed to identify and manage like mental health screenings in that way to help people who have LGBTQ like needs that are not being addressed or even noticed?
Sure. Yeah. I think, and like you were just saying, in terms of generational considerations, why not do screenings for all sorts of mental health issues, including sexual orientation and gender expression at, nursing facilities or, communities, over 55 communities, to also include that as part of the overall comprehensive approach to wellness, which I think gets ignored, and sexuality and sexual orientation and gender expression gets ignored around our older population because folks, feel like, oh, it couldn't possibly change or it couldn't possibly be something that wasn't acknowledged earlier. And we're sexual beings until the day we die. So, I think that would definitely be a helpful component to add in certain arenas.
Yeah, keep the discussions going.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just think when I'm thinking about my paperwork and when someone fills out sexuality, I mean, I would guess, actually now thinking about it, that probably people are eventually they will confide in me, but I think initially people do not want to talk about sexuality, either because maybe they were taught that that's inappropriate, right? That might make you more sexual,
right?
Or more promiscuous or something, or get you into something that you're not really authentically feeling. But I do think that actually being able to explore that is really, really healthy. How do you think that sexuality and LGBTQ intersect within our community, and why is it important for us to keep talking about our mental health in this way?
Yeah. I mean, I think our community is, there's wonderful things about our community in terms of being a loving community. I think it's a place, at least personally, where I feel, for the most part, safe as a member of the LGBT community, but a recognition too that there's always the possibility and there's always sort of this potential that's there for folks. And so I think it's about ongoing work, not only on an individual level, but on a community level, to always be sort of assessing and evaluating and improving and working on what can create more, again, wellness on all the different levels, to make it as not only stronger individually, but as families, communities, high schools, workplaces, whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about, that's why I was asking about Carpinteria, because I was thinking about the high schools. I know they have a group there. And then, I mean, do you think like at county mental health, like, because you brought up wellness, but I was just thinking, does behavioral wellness, do you know how they, in our county here in Santa Barbara, do you know how do they do LGBTQ support, or do they not even focus as much on that? I know they're kind of more into the severe mental health issue at the time, but.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know very much about, the specific programs that they're doing. Yeah. Absolutely.
Right, because I mean, there has to be people coming there that they are treating that have that need. And, I think as we've already described, people tend to hold negative beliefs about mental health problems, and it's regardless of their age or what knowledge they may have of mental health problems, or whether they know someone who has a mental health problem. And I think that there's a lot of negative attitudes that appear to be so entrenched that I feel like these campaigns and things really need to be multifaceted. That's what I was asking you, because I think there's like, you can listen to something, but then also how do you experience like, having a relationship or a friendship with someone and really absorbing that more in a different way. How do you think we could put more sexuality or LGBTQ into our lives that would help create that mental health?
Yeah. I definitely think, like we were talking about earlier a little bit, just the increased representations in media and more sort of range in terms of what is represented. It might be community events that are more geared towards very specific issues. Maybe it might be creativity in artists, highlighting artists in the LGBT community, highlighting, studies that have been done, events, celebrating different things, so that it doesn't always have to be, what someone might consider stigmatizing, because someone might not want to come out to a protest and be labeled as XYZ person, but they feel more comfortable coming out to an art exhibit. So if we have both, that's serving different types of folks. So I think just increasing the range of the different types of events that are available to folks, and increasing sort of an awareness of the different range of services that are out there, not just mental health, but healthcare services, financial support, basic needs support.
Yeah. I mean, is there like a hub where people can go if they're listening and they want to go figure out where to start that idea?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's always, if you go online and really just start to Google stuff around Santa Barbara, I mean, the agencies here, we all try to do a good job of getting ourselves on social media and on the web and, all of that. So you're going to find stuff on there. And really, I think we have such a great community of collaborators. If you call any agency and say, actually, I'm needing help with this, can you guys help me? And we can't, we'll say, but you know what agency can? XYZ.
So you kind of collaborate all together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there there's not like a coalition, like a commission or coalition or anything though, where you all meet, like, like how there's the mental health commission, I think.
Right.
I was just thinking that's a great idea. If there was like a group that really met and made that. I mean, I hear that you're all doing that individually and collaborating.
Right.
But I mean, I guess like we have the Jewish Federation, if there was like a place people could go to, like a one-stop kind of place.
Right. Yeah, that would be awesome.
But I can see what you're saying too, because you're saying that some people don't really want to like identify in that way too.
Right.
I was looking up news, and this is kind of, I don't know what to exactly think of this, but I mean, I was telling Mariela about this before we started, but that Google, I guess, has decided that even though, I mean, in the past, they really encouraged, I think, people to express their sexuality. But now they've created some kind of an app that claims to change people from gay to straight. And I thought that just came out in the news like a couple days ago.
Mind blowing.
And so I just wonder if it's like one leader, and this person who wrote this little column here was saying that she received dozens of phone calls from lesbians who had married men hoping that would cure them of their same-sex attractions and could no longer continue the charade. She saw countless families being destroyed. And she's saying how every major mental health organization in the U.S. has stated that attempts to change a person's sexual orientation are ineffective and dangerous. Mm-hmm. which is true, and
Right.
that world-renowned Stanford psychiatrist Irvin Yalom, he wrote in a recent memoir, Becoming Myself, he says, I often treated gay men who in retrospect suffered primarily from society's views of them. While companies like Apple have removed similar apps from their stores, realizing that as leaders in the community, they have an obligation to uphold basic human rights, it seems that maybe some of these companies they're like on the fence almost, about their homophobia or something.
Right.
So, I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm just thinking that that's a sad. Hopefully, we can all envision a world too, where we can be more accepting of each person.
Right.
Because that just feels like, I wonder why that shifts so much.
Right.
Is it one leader? Is it a board? Or
Right. No, totally. Yeah.
Because I think actually in the past, Google's been very supportive. And then one other tidbit was that the leader of this LGBTQ rights group called Equality Utah has resigned from the governor's youth suicide task force because they just banned a bill for conversion therapy. So I guess maybe they're not allowing conversion therapy. So it seems precarious. Like you get one leader maybe who changes things.
Sure.
Do you think in Santa Barbara are things pretty set in or what's California's status in that way?
Yeah. It's hard. I don't want to say it's set because I feel like I might jinx something.
Well,
Yeah,
I know there's laws and things. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and I think it's one of those things where it really comes down to ultimately, banding together and creating, momentum and keeping the voice, for those who do need a voice going so that it doesn't become overpowered by what has traditionally held most power and privilege. So it's definitely important to not fall asleep on the job, even when it feels comfortable, because you never know.
Well, I think there's like so many people that really are expressing their sexuality. I don't know if it's really, this is more politically up on the top, but I think that the people in our world are who they are. So you can't change that. And I think that, like you're saying, just to keep the conversation going. And also don't shy away just because, you talk to one person and they say, I don't want to talk about that. Like Mariela was saying, go find the second person or the third or, be persistent because you have to remind yourself that it's for you, for your well-being. And then you'll be a better, healthier person out in the world yourself too.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we have just a minute or two. And Mariela, I want to thank you for coming on the show. Do you have any final words of wisdom for your listeners?
Yeah, it's hard to really sort of encapsulate it into just a couple words, but it does come down to recognizing that it is okay if it's hard. It is okay if it doesn't happen right away, but I think ultimately it's about sticking with who you are because who you are is worth it, and you'll know that one day.
Yeah, and that's the biggest freedom you can give yourself, actually, is self-acceptance. And I think, we can work together. I love what you said, to help create a supportive environment, and we can empower and care for the individual. And I just like to remind people some ways we can work together are volunteering, checking in with ourselves, learning about other cultures, getting accurate information from accurate sources. Make sure it's not a random scientific study. And I think that can lead to understanding, including, and caring. And I'm always trying to imagine a world where we can share our feelings and thoughts more freely, where we can move toward health for all human beings. And I know there's a lot of work to be done because I think only 60%, if that's accurate, of the people needing mental health treatment receive it. But I think if we each do our part, and if that just means, you listen or you keep your mind spinning and you keep your ideas open, that we can end negative perceptions about men.